welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 135 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 61 of A Clash of Kings, that's Tyrion 14.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter, try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some additional information about the characters and places in this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
What is it? Is it a mosquito? Is it a fly?
There's
what are you chasing?
It's a fly, I think.
I've been watching.
This is going to run and run.
Chase it around the room as we've been doing our intro here. Yeah. Oh, I'm doing all right. I'm a little tired, but I have a hunch you might be a little more tired than I am. As I just before we get rolling, I just want to sincerely thank you for spending half your evening tutoring my daughter in some sort of mathematical thing that I didn't understand what was happening.
Well, it was my pleasure. She's a willing learner and a pleasure to hang out with. So, yeah, no problem at all. Anytime.
Well, much appreciated. How are you doing otherwise?
I'm good, I think. Trying to think if anything exciting's happened. I had to change a tyre. I got a flat tyre. And I had to change a tyre.
Were you out and about when it went flat?
No.
Oh, that's
in
good.
the driveway. But I discovered I was not strong enough. But my son has been doing weightlifting and he could get the lug nuts off and I couldn't. So that was very useful. I was like, whew, I'm glad you're here.
Too much soccer. Your legs are too powerful. They've sapped it from your arm and upper body.
In my defense, my son is quite a bit bigger than me and doing weightlifting. And he hurt himself getting these. I mean, they were on hard. They really were.
Those lug nuts, I tell you. Well, speaking of exercising, I've got an odd gym dilemma that I have to sort out. Well, so I've been a member at this gym. It's very conveniently located. It's about a mile away or so. I can get there in about a minute and a half. And it's not much to look at. It's just a gym. I was paying $5 a month. It's one of those set it and forget it things. I just, it was $5 a month. Didn't really care about it. I use it, but the $5 a month was basically negligible. So it was pretty great. Well, it seems that last week they closed down.
Okay. Gyms do that kind of thing.
They do, which is not that unheard of. But they closed down for a week and then reopened under a new name and increased their price from $5 a month to $25 a month.
That's not the same.
It's not the same, but it's still the same space. They're offering daycare, which is great considering my children are probably closer to needing daycare than I am. So I got to decide who wins out, my frugality or my fitness. I've got to make a call here.
I've met you. That is not a fair contest.
Yes, that's the way I'm leaning. Now, obviously, our listeners don't, but where we work, there's a very nice gym on site. So I could work out there, but it's like a 20-minute drive from my house.
I was going to say, that's not a minute from your home.
Right.
That's different. Yeah.
So I've got until next week, end of next week, to decide what I want to do. So we'll see.
I do have one thing. And the reason I don't know what my sister got up to at the soccer match is because I didn't watch the soccer match. Because this weekend I played Dungeons and Dragons.
Get out.
I did. It was very exciting. We had a great time.
Is it still played like it was back in the 80s?
Apparently, it's more popular than ever right now. It's like resurgent.
Huh. But do you still do it on graph paper and stuff?
I think so. We didn't get very far, to be honest.
Okay.
We were there for 5 hours, and we met in a bar. That's all we managed to do. There was lots of character creation, which kind of took my time. So I'm a Triton.
Oh.
Which is sort of like half man, half fish type thing. So
sure.
Aquaman.
Yeah.
So my name is My name is Gil.
Oh, good name. Good name.
Gil Momoa is my full name. But that's it. Nothing's really happened. I've met a Minotaur, and it's my friend Tim, but I don't think I'm going to be friends with the Minotaur in the game because he was not very nice to me. I offered to buy him a beer, and he was quite shirty, just because he's a Minotaur.
Well, that sounds like it could have been fun if you'd gotten any further.
We had fun. So it's the group of dads that I play board games with. It's them.
I would have guessed that.
Yes. One of their kids really likes Dungeons & Dragons and wanted to Dungeon Master a game with us.
Okay.
So we're playing, and then one of the daughters is also playing, and then her sister started watching, and the reason it sort of took 5 hours because we stopped to let her join in because she was so captivated by what we were up to.
Wow.
So now we have quite a big group going now. So
I have to say, I don't think either of my kids would be captivated by... watching.
I didn't even take my child to this event.
And he plays board games with you.
Yeah, it's been a while. I bought him, his birthday's in November, and we're in late March now, and I bought him a board game for his birthday, and we've not played it.
Well, in time. Maybe over the summer when it's too hot to go outside or something like that.
Let's get down to business. How did we leave Tyrion? Last we saw of Tyrion, he was surveying the battle from a box atop a merlin on the battlements of King's Landing.
Wasn't it a chair on top of a box?
Oh, possibly, yes. After witnessing the horrifying effect of the wildfire, he sent his nephew King Joffrey to have fun with the 3 whores, who, I should add, are, in this context, 3 giant trebuchets, raining down trouble on Stannis, and then this is back to Tyrion, moving to the King's Gate, which was under attack from ground forces who had crossed upriver. There he'd found the Hound to be unwilling to return to the battle. As we left him, Tyrion was riding out at the vanguard of a small force. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
All right. As Tyrion clears the sallyport, he can see, despite the confines of his visor, that 4 galleys have come across the river at this point. 3 are beached and have disgorged their troops. The 4th lies offshore and is catapulting burning pitch at the city. He calls for a wedge and takes point with Mandon Moore to his right and, to Tyrion's surprise, Podrick Payne to his left. He briefly tries to send Pod back, but settles for warning him to stay close.
As they approach the gate in formation, they see soldiers manning a battering ram. Tyrion calls for lances, but just before they engage, his horse slips in the mud and gore. Tyrion and the horse pull out of the crash, and he regains the command with a cry of "King's Landing!", which is taken up by the men. They crash into the line of foot soldiers and take a terrible toll. Moore runs through a man and breaks his standard-bearing lance. Tyrion teaches a Florent a lesson in always wearing your helm to the battle, sadly one that shan't be remembered.
Nope, not by him anyway. Stannis' men drop the ram to fight. Tyrion dispatches a few more, but his horse won't jump over the ram. Ser Mandon's horse flies over it, and he rains death all around him. A spear bounces off Tyrion's armor, and an arrow glances off his helm just by the eye slit, reminding him to keep moving. The King's Gate seems basically secured, but Tyrion sees more men landing by the Mudgate, where Lannister forces, either Lancells or Balon Swans, by Tyrion's estimation, are fighting fiercely, and yells for his men to follow him there. The cries of King's Landing are now punctuated by Halfman, which Tyrion likes.
Riding down the riverbank, Tyrion begins to understand the Hound's terror. There's fire everywhere. His wedge is no more. Each man has his own battle. Tyrion's horse is afraid too, but is more easily cowed than Clegane. Tyrion dispatches a few dying men staggering from the river. His horse rears, and he feels the thrill of battle as his men shout, "Half man!" and he raises his axe to the stars. Jaime had told him of battle fever, but he'd never imagined feeling it himself. He continues to do damage to his foes, but at one point only a timely intervention of an unseen helper prevented him from death at the hands of a knight.
He meets up with Sir Balon Swan, and they determine that Stannis has constructed a bridge of ships across the river. A rider is even trying to bring his horse across. The crossing is insane, but hundreds are making it. With Swan and Moore, they make for the city edge of the bridge. a sunken Stannis vessel, Dragon's Bane. Tyrion and Swan both lose their horses. The fighting on the tilted deck of the ship is even more primal. Tyrion is reduced to a broken spear, but all the while Swan and Moore are with him, as comfortable as those born to fight.
The ships list, and Tyrion ends up in the water. In his confusion, it seems there's fighting on both sides of the river. He's clinging on to whatever he can to avoid drowning, and Mandon Moore offers him his left hand to pull Tyrion to safety. Tyrion notices the oddity of that too late, and Moore smashes him in the face with his sword. The helm absorbs some of the blow, but far from all. Tyrion ends up on the deck at Moore's feet, and he presses the sword to Tyrion's throat. Just as he's about to deliver the coup de grace, Ser Mandon lurched left and goes overboard. Tyrion thinks Jaime has saved him, but it was Podrick.
Podrick Payne to the rescue.
Yeah. So I noticed that actually, that one thing, when he tells Podrick to stay close earlier in the chapter, that actually saves his life, because Podrick did.
Right.
And had he not been, he was going to be toast at the hands of Mandon Moore.
Very true, yeah. Another thing that happened at the beginning, it wasn't an actual thing, it was actually a thought that Tyrion had that came back full circle at the end, is he refers to Ser Mandon as Death in Snow White Silk at the beginning of the chapter.
Yes, he does.
And at the end, it was almost Ser Mandon that brought about his death, or maybe still, I mean, he's not in great shape, Tyrion, so, but he does still seem to be alive at the moment when the chapter ends.
Right, yes. In actual fact, in the TV show, as you know, I'll cover that later on,
right,
he looks in worse shape. I mean, from what you hear here, he's just been smashed in the helm with a mailed fist, which, yeah, I mean, that would really hurt, but not usually life-threatening, you would think.
I think it was the sword I think he got hit with a sword. He was reaching out with his left hand, and I think he hit him with a sword.
Oh, it was the sword. Oh, you're right. It even says that. I read that like 30 seconds ago.
That is unusual for you not to remember that.
but anyway, the point is he was wearing a helm. In the
right.
In the TV show, he isn't. So he takes the sword across the head without a helm. So he looks in pretty bad shape in the TV show. So of course, they may be the same story. They may diverge. Who knows?
That's right. We've discovered there are divergences between the two mediums. So,
although I've got to say, way fewer than I thought. At this point, I thought we'd be much more diverged than we are.
Right. Yes, I agree.
It has cleaved very close for these first two books.
Yes, and that might continue through season 4. But
really?
Season 5, right? There's 5 books. Right?
Oh. While there is a book to copy.
Yes, exactly. While there's a book to copy, we might... yes. After book 5, who knows if it's going to be close or not? We're on our road there.
We won't have a podcast to describe it because we won't have a book to read.
That's right. Someone just asked me this past weekend, what are we going to do when we run out of books, chapters in the books to read? And I was like, well, considering we're not quite through with book 2 and we've still got 3 more books to go, all of which have at least 60 to 70 chapters.
We've got time to make a plan.
Right. A few years still. But you know
what? Actually, I mean, not to derail entirely, but we talked about doing The Name of the Wind, the Patrick Rothfuss books.
Right. Yeah,
I would happily do
King Killer Chronicles.
The King Killer Chronicles, yeah. But also, I would do the Third Body Problem with you.
That would be fun. Yeah.
The 3-body problem. The third body. God, I'm losing my mind.
I knew what you meant.
Because that might be timely as well, because it might coincide with the Benioff and Weiss TV show.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah, that would be a fun one to do, for sure.
Yeah.
We can get sidetracked like this because really not a great deal happened in this chapter. But
yeah, this whole battle is kind of small chapters.
Yeah,
without
it really
an awful lot to report on.
Yeah. I think the largest one was the last Sansa chapter was like 8 pages on my e-reader. Yeah. So anyway, outside the King's Gate, he describes a scene as 3 ships having unloaded men onto the tourney grounds, and a 4th ship behind them launching burning pitch, kind of protecting the men in the ships as they were disengorging. And I'm not sure who organized that, but it seems pretty well done. There's, pretty well designed to have a successful launch onto the tourney ground. So whoever it was, it might have been a better choice as a high captain than Sir Emery, anyway.
Yes.
Because it really couldn't have been easy to coordinate all that amid all this chaos going on here.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say actually is I felt that this is maybe just bordering on pedantry, because I thought these guys had crossed before the ships came. You know what I mean? It felt like this was part of the sort of strategy to have these guys cross, but this was real ships, and the real ships have only just arrived. This was a plan that was just immediately hatched. Like, the ships that got far enough along the river to not get affected by the wildfire went to the left bank, picked up people, and then sailed back across to attack the Kingsgate.
You think, or were they already troop carrying? Some of those ships. Remember, some were empty to carry troops, and others were full of soldiers. So
you're right. I've been duped by the fact that the intelligence that Tyrion learned was that troops had come across the river, but there's no guarantee that these troops did come across the river. They may have been on boats all the time, these particular troops.
Right, yes, they may have. It seems likely, since they're here so much ahead of everyone else.
Yes, exactly. That is a lot more likely, yeah. Okay, I feel better about it.
There's a similar setup at the actual King's Gate. There's the men ramming the gate, and then there's archers surrounding the men ramming the gate, protecting them. So, it's pretty good setup there as well.
I also think that at this point, we've talked a little bit before about how firing burning pitch from the ships is probably more dangerous to the people firing than the recipients.
Right.
But there is a value here, because as you're swarming up the beach to the river gate and trying to scale the walls or whatever it is you're trying to do, hurling pitch into the city certainly constitutes a significant distraction. You need to not hit the walls, though, because that's very bad for your troops who are up against those walls.
Right, it might roll back down.
Exactly.
That is a solid point. Yeah, you wonder if they're close enough to be able to get it to clear the wall, to get it
right. Because if you're hurling this onto the beach, that's pretty indiscriminate.
Right. Now, it would have made sense while the men were coming off of the ships, launching it over them, to keep people from coming out of the city. But once they are in the firing range, then it would not behoove them to continue to do so. In fact, maybe that bigger ship is also packed with soldiers, and now they should move into place and unload all of them as well. But so Tyrion makes good on his promise. He told them at the end of last chapter, when he was trying to rouse them to follow him out the Sallyport and defend the King's Gate, he said, I'm not going to shout King Joffrey. I'm not going to shout Casterly Rock. We're going to shout King's Landing because this is your city, and you need to rise up and protect it. And that's what he does. As they're riding, as they form their flying wedge, he shouts King's Landing, and they take up the call. So
right. Yeah, I mean, you have to do that. If you want people to fight for you, you've got to give them a reason that they can latch onto. If these were Lannister soldiers, sure, Casterly Rock might work, but these are not. These are just recently armed citizens of King's Landing.
Right.
And they're fighting for their home. Of course, it's a tenuous claim still, because you could very well, if they sat and thought for just a second, they'd be like, King's Landing will still be my home if King Stannis is in charge.
Right. I had that same thought. I was like, well, there's nothing really changes there.
Yeah, if I go out that gate and fight them, I'm probably going to end up dead. If I open that gate and invite them in, there's a chance I'll be hailed as a hero.
Yes, exactly. You got to wonder how many people would be considering that, because you open the gates and let them in, the less fighting that those men have to do to get in, it's probably better mood they'll be when they get inside.
But I think, as we've mentioned before, I think a lot of this goes back to the end of Robert's Rebellion and the sack of King's Landing.
Yes, yes.
Because basically, Westerosi people who were taking the throne killed, raped, and pillaged King's Landing.
Yes.
And so that has to create both a fear of the next invasion, but also a sort of sense of just general sense of a lack of comfort and safety in a new king taking over. New king takes over, we all end up dead.
Yes, very much so. You Sansa mentioned it in, I guess, the two Sansa chapters ago, that that thought was on their mind of, well, when the sack of King's Landing by the Lannisters during the end of Robert's Rebellion, that's they're still thinking about that, and those people let them in, and we plan to fight. So how much worse is it going to be for us?
Yeah, but they plan to fight, perhaps because of that, because they don't want to open the gates because they know what can happen.
All right, yeah, exactly. But so Tyrion clearly has some knowledge of battle theory. It's evident here. We saw him reading about battle in that Tyrion 2 in a Game of Thrones when he and Jon were riding to the to Castle Black together. He was reading about the Field of Fire, that particular chapter. But so his design of this flying wedge was probably more effective than a haphazard free for all sortie. Just run out there and kill someone.
Yes, no, for sure. I mean, I would definitely want to be in a wedge because I've got protection on both sides of me. But of course, if my horse stumbles in the mud, that doesn't really... The wedge immediately falls apart.
It does, yes. And you wonder how many people he would have taken out along with him. It would have been quite the awkward wedge at that point.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed the battle description in this one. I will say on first read, I thought that George Martin had fallen into the trap of being too much our hero dispatches enemies left and right, but on a few rereads, and he does. I mean, yes. Tyrion clearly comes out of this with a considerable body count, which is amazing for the man of his stature. But that being said, on the reread, I did notice that Tyrion was getting away with a few things. He was riding people down with his horse. Well, right. That was the horse that did that. He was leaving people behind him wounded because he didn't actually kill them. He just knocked them down or something. And he was dispatching the already injured. So his actual stats were being padded by things that weren't really him out fighting someone.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yeah, that's true. There were some instances, some lines of description that caused me to roll my eyes a bit. And in fact, as you were saying, Martin falling into the trap of our hero dispatches the enemies left and right. Some of this kind of read like it was a dream sequence. Yeah. Like when he rears up on his horse and shakes his axe at the sky and they're cheering half man around him. That was, it might have been a little bit much. And there was an awful lot of instances of somehow he did this, somehow he did that. And as I was reading that, I was like, yeah, that is the question. Somehow. How did he do that?
You do have the opportunity to explain it, how it happened, if you want.
You're right. Yeah, and, I just think that we'll cover a lot of this in Penetrate. In fact, in some ways, this entire chapter, you could pick apart this entire chapter pedantically if you wanted to. So, we'll cover some of the things in the chapter, but to me, it just felt like he wasn't trained well enough. I don't believe that he would have been trained well enough to do a lot of the things that he does in this chapter.
All right, two things I'll say. One is he was on horseback, and most of the people that he was fighting were not on horseback, and that is a tremendous advantage.
It is indeed, I agree.
If you've had any kind of training, you can use that to your advantage. But secondly, I really like your idea of the whole thing being a dream. Maybe he got cut across the head by Mandon Moore right at the start of the chapter, just as they came out of the sally port, and the rest of it was just his dream.
That could be it. That would explain a lot.
Half-man! So they clear the King's Gate and they ride for the Mud Gate or the River Gate. In the last Tyrion chapter, the messenger said that hundreds had landed on the Tawny ground. So has Tyrion dispatched all of those hundreds?
That was unclear.
There's a lot of potential points of unclarity here. It may have been 50 men. But then again, if 4 boats have disgorged, that's probably hundreds. That's probably not far off.
Yeah, right.
But But this wasn't the first people they'd encountered. I mean, they'd already been, those people who'd landed had already been fighting other forces before everyone retreated inside and Tyrion came back out. So that's true. Force might have been trimmed down.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't know how many sorties the Hound and his men did before the Hound gave up. So I'm not going back out there. So, yeah, that's a good point. He notices right after they managed to cause the ram to be discarded and everyone either fled, fought, or died, he notices that only a handful of his men are left as he rides towards the Mudgate. I'm just wondering if there's men still left out that are just going to pick up the ram and start ramming the Kingsgate again as they round the corner of the city toward the Mudgate.
It's a very good point. I think what needs to happen is a little coordination. They need to open the Kingsgate and drag the ram inside.
Yes, quickly, get it inside.
And then prop up the door with the ram.
Let them fire arrows at the Kingsgate. So I went back and looked up. I was trying to figure out how big King's Landing is miles wide. And it said that the best description I could find is Kat mentions as she's coming into King's Landing, when she came to see Ned to show him the dagger and she was on the ship and she could see the city from the Blackwater Bay, that King's Landing sprawls across several miles. So, and then if you look at a map, the Mudgate is about halfway across the length of the city. It's kind of in the middle of the eastern part of the city. So they had to round the Kingsgate is on the southwestern wall. So they had to round the Kingsgate and ride about halfway across the city to get to the Mudgate. So, my point of all that is they're leaving that Kingsgate wide open back there.
Yes, yeah. Maybe the hope is that the Hound regains his courage and sort of fortifies that gate, or something like that. But yeah, it's a good point, and that's quite a long schlep to ride out. In Tyrion's dream, it's the middle of the night with the stars shining, and they've got to ride across fires and bodies and mud and gore to get to the Mudgate. It would be a scary ride to make in a hurry.
Yes,
especially towards more death and destruction.
Unless you have battle fever, then I guess it would go by in the blink of an eye. Yeah. Now, this description right here that I'm going to mention, it tripped me up at first because in my mind when I was reading this chapter, I was picturing the line of ships, the bridge of ships, to be further upriver, more toward where the Kingsgate was, kind of. Okay. But in actual description, they're from the Mudgate. They look downriver and see it. So it's closer toward the boom chain than toward the Kingsgate. Okay. So, in my head, I had it the other way around. I thought it wasn't. I wasn't
sure exactly where I had it. But it does feel like it's surprising to find enough boats to form this bridge, because it feels like this is where the fire was at its most intense. It's surprising that there are this many boats left going.
Yeah, they're in pretty bad shape. Most of them are sunk in the stuff. So I guess they just kind of cobbled things together.
Yeah, true.
But he says, Sir Balon Swan kind of points downriver and says, look, and Tyrion doesn't know what he's talking about at first. And then he sees hundreds of armored knights flooding off of this sunken ship. And he's like, what is happening? So he spans, his gaze across because he's wearing this helmet and he doesn't have much in the way of peripheral vision. And he sees that there's a 20-boat chain of ships stuck together, creating this bridge. And he, like I said, he mentions hundreds of armored knights flooding across it. Yes, when he says, those are some brave men, let's go kill them. He gets together with what he referred to as his handful of men left. Yeah. And Balon Swan and however many Balon Swan has left, and they ride toward these guys, and they seem to clear them all out pretty effortlessly. And I was thinking, if there's hundreds of armored knights, how many could he possibly... Now, they're all on horseback, like you mentioned, but seemed rather easy task.
No, it's a reasonable point. But I will say, if you imagine, this is quite a wide river at this point. I mean, this is not a narrow stream. This is a fairly wide river. It would be arduous to clamber over 20 ships to get to the other side.
Right. Yeah.
In full armor.
In armor.
So by the time by the time you get there, you might be absolutely exhausted.
That's a good. I hadn't thought about that. The human factor. These guys do have stamina, and that might be running low. So and they're not on horseback. Except for the one guy, the one knight who is trying to get across.
Trying to ride all the way across, which is crazy, crazy.
But so here's a question I got for you. He looks and he sees that the bridge is creaking and shifting, and this is a quote, creaking, shifting, and like to burst asunder. So why go out onto the ship bridge? What benefit? Fight them as they come to land while working to dislodge the boats and destroy the bridge. I'm not sure what benefit they would gain by actually going out onto that creaky, shifting, like to burst asunder bridge.
Okay, I will say that I'll defend them here a little. If you let them get to the end of the bridge, they spread out, and you've got a problem containing them. On that bridge is a choke point. If you can get onto the bridge and maybe find a point along the span of that bridge where it's really awkward to clamber. And again,
that's true.
If you go on boat 18 or 19 of the 20, they're going to be just dragging by the time they get to you.
Just kill me now. I was thinking that the fact that they're mounted, that Tyrion and his forces are mounted, is eliminated. That advantage is eliminated on the ships because.
But Tyrion and Balon lost their horses en route to the end of the bridge.
Yes.
So perhaps the plan changed as they found themselves on foot. Because if you think about it, probably the people who get across the bridge are actually jumping down off the last ship onto the shore, and so they're coming from they've got the high ground, so get up there and fight them on a level.
And maybe Tyrion, the description says that Tyrion couldn't rein up in time and that his horse jumped onto the bridge and broke his leg, so maybe he never meant to be out on the bridge. Maybe he just accidentally ended up there and thought, okay, but then he goes further out. The description mentions him going at least to the third boat,
right? But again, that's what I would do if I was on that bridge. And again, the trickle of men who are actually making it this far is so thin that you can actually walk towards it. There's no momentum towards you. I go and find the most difficult point for them to attack you.
Yeah, somewhere where you've got at least the altitude advantage.
Yes,
elevation
where a deck slopes so that you can be on the upper end of it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
So at this point, a naked man falls from the sky and bursts on the deck of a ship in the bridge. I'm assuming this is Joffrey having fun with his antler man.
I would think so. I wonder if there were antlers attached to the head of that man.
It went uncommented as if it was kind of like a usual thing to happen, but I assume that's what that was.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. That feels like an antler man to me. Yes.
So the ship that... Obviously, the whole thing is, sort of like a confusing battle, but the ship that Tyrion is on breaks free of this chain of ships and spins around. And as it spins, he's sort of like being dragged towards the water, right? He's sort of slipping down the deck towards the water.
Right.
But as he spins, he sees sort of like the north shore of the river, the Red Keep, and then the south shore, and sort of sees it all a couple of times. And he realizes that he's seeing battle, or feels like he's seeing battle on both sides of the river.
Right. It's confusing to him because he didn't realize at first that he was spinning, and he thought he saw Stannis in battle on the north shore and the Red Keep on the south shore, and he thought, well, that's not possible. And then he was kind of not sure exactly what he saw. So he's wondering that he realizes he's spinning, and then he's wondering, wait, did I just see Stannis and his forces in battle? Who could they possibly be battling if they haven't crossed the river yet?
The one thing I'll say is, was he just mistaken? I think he wasn't just mistaken, because if you think about it, if you look towards the castle, you're going to see the beach, the fires, the castle walls, and the fighting. The other way, you're just going to see woods and people.
Right.
It'd be hard even if you're spinning around, to really genuinely mistake that for the city. If
Yes,
there's fighting
I see
going
what you're
on
saying.
and the backdrop to it is just open sky, then that isn't the city side.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah, because if both sides look similar, he could have been spinning faster than he realized and saw the same side twice.
Right.
And thought he was seeing two different sides. But yes, the two sides look very different. So, yeah, that's good. That's a very good point.
But then I was like, who the heck is fighting Stannis?
Right, that's what I was going to say.
and I came up with nothing, but you actually came up with the answer, I think.
Well, so who is forming shield walls? I mean, from Lannister troops. Obviously, the Lannister troops on the north side don't have enough men out there likely to be forming shield walls and stuff. So, because they've just got a bunch of gold cloaks out there. So,
just in passing, one more time, they do have city walls they could hide behind.
Right, they don't need a shield wall. They have an actual wall.
Yes.
So, if he's not... Now, he did just take an arrow. Tyrion did just take an arrow to the shoulder. He's losing blood in a spinning boat. So, you can't... We can't take for granted that he's seeing things accurately. But there's one of two options here, that if Stannis is indeed in battle, it's either the mountain clans or the Tyrells have arrived.
Yeah. I had forgotten that the mountain clans were out there, but of course they had been sent out there to harry Stannis' troops, and so this is a perfect time for them to join in.
Right. So we haven't heard anything about them since we heard they were trying to smoke his men out and attack them. Attack their rear guard and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
my first thought was exactly the Tyrells or Tywin or Dawn or Essos or someone had come to the rescue,
Right.
But I'd forgotten about the wildlings, so that would make sense. And it's both. I mean, whoever Stannis is having to fight on that side of the river is bad news for Stannis. But if it's only the wildlings, then they're not a force to tip the balance of this battle, I don't think.
I agree. There would only be a few hundred.
So Tyrion's stuck on the drifting ship and sort of sliding towards... I mean, he's still weighted down by his armor, so if he falls in the water, he's a goner.
Yeah. Although maybe he swims as well as he rides war horses. He'd be fine.
Like a Triton, probably.
Yeah.
So Ser Mandon Moore calls for him, and he reaches out with his hand. And at that point, something jars in Tyrion's head that there's something wrong with what he's done. It's because he's reached out with his left hand. But the more I thought about that, the more I thought, in a battle, that wouldn't be weird. You'd actually, because you want to keep your sword in your right hand, so you'd lend the left hand to pull him out. But
I had a similar thought. I thought, well, he could have been holding on to something for stability with his right hand, because it's a stronger hand. He'd rather Tyrion fall than him fall. So.
Right. Tyrion smelled a rat, and he was right, because Mandon Moore had it in for him. When he gets hold of him, he brings his sword hand around and hits him across the helmet with the sword.
Yes. I don't know that was the most effective means of killing Tyrion in this battle. There's plenty of opportunity to have killed him.
Letting him fall into the water would have been more fine.
Yes. There's several options here. He could have rode past him in the chaos of the battlefield and just stuck his sword into his gut. Nobody would have even noticed. Or let the ship that Tyrion's on that is breaking free, that's about to go, be carried away toward the wildfire and the boom chain. Yeah. Just let him stay there, or help him across, and when he's halfway, let go of his hand.
Right. Wait, the one thing I will say is, I mean, this I'm sort of two minds of this, because on the one, you're standing out on a bridge. Everyone can see you. You're the only people, and you're wearing a white coat, and yes. He is noticeably Tyrion Lannister. So it's a weird location, but it is also probably a very effective location, because you wouldn't have to kill him completely with that first blow. He's going to slide into the water, and the water will take care of the rest. He's on a precarious place. So yes. In that respect, it makes sense.
Yeah, I guess so. But then, so he smacks him in the face with the sword. Tyrion falls almost into the water, grabs onto an oar and kind of shimmies his way up the oar, and then flops onto the deck. And that's when, very theatrically, Mandon Moore stands over him and puts the sword to his throat. And I'm thinking, if this is supposed to be on the sly, this is hardly the way to go. It has to be the most noticeable means of killing him.
It does have a feel of sort of wrestling, sort of like Mandon Moore is the heel, and he's going to just spend too long planning the coup de grace.
Yeah, he could have very easily just chopped that oar off with his sword, or as Tyrion is making his way up, kick him in the face and knock him back into the water. So I don't want to get too pedantic. I mean, that's what I was saying. This whole chapter, you could find a lot of pedantic things with. I'm sure it is hard to write a battle chapter when your hero is an untrained, person who's not.
But he managed it with Sansa without sort of breaking too much.
That's true.
Now, you're going to come up with some possibilities for that, but I'm just going to jump to the punchline. The person responsible for this assassination was Cersei Lannister. She's the one. Now, I will let you have your theories before we go too much further, but let me just say, of all the treacheries, this is unbelievable. Alayaya was bad enough, right? That was a terrible treachery. But you could argue that was just a tool in making sure Joffrey was safe. Okay, you could make that argument. This is beyond the pale.
Yeah. Kinslaying is what it would be.
Right.
Would be called, I guess. Yes, she is very likely the top suspect, but I don't know that she's the only suspect.
Go on then.
So let's just consider the facts and the possibilities here. So let's start with Cersei, because as you said, she certainly would be very high on the suspect list. So she has clear motive. She hates him, and she's hated him longer than Joffrey has hated him. So she probably has hated him pretty much her whole life. And she thinks that he is trying to get Joff killed. And she heard him say he'd do horrible things to Tommen if anything happened to Alayaya, and he would do them himself. And he continues to work against any plan and attempt to rule that she comes up with. And she took what she thought was his girlfriend, who ended up actually being Alayaya, and is holding her captive as a means of controlling him. So certainly a lot of reason that she might have been the one to do it. And we know she's got a proven history. Multiple attempts to kill Robert, one of which was successful. There was the plan to have him enter the melee, and then someone accidentally kill the king. And she ended up killing him with strong wine. In both instances, she had planned on using someone else to do the killing.
Right.
She's the Queen Regent, so she would have plenty of opportunity and the power over Ser Mandon to command him to do so. So, but the thing, one downside is she would have had to have had the plan set up ahead of time, because Mandon's been with Tyrion and Joff since the battle started. So it would have had to have been if you get an opportunity to kill him, take it type situation.
Okay, good. I'm convinced it's Cersei. What else have you got?
Okay. So, what about our young King Joffrey Baratheon?
Okay, immediate objection. Involved too much planning. He's too lazy. He's too lazy to do this. But go on.
Okay, well, we know Joff also hates Tyrion. He embarrassed Joff on multiple occasions and has slapped him in public on multiple occasions. He stopped the beating of Sansa in front of everybody, and when Joff said that he was doing it because Sansa had the blood of the wolf, Tyrion in front of everybody says, "You have the wits of a goose." So, embarrassment. Slapped him in Winterfell when he was disrespectful to the Starks. And remember, the Hound after that said, "The prince will remember that." And Tyrion said, be sure that he does.
Yes.
And then after the riot, I had forgotten about this slap. I had to do a little digging on this. After the riot, when they were all back in the Red Keep, he slapped Joff so hard that Joff's crown flew off, and then he shoved Joff to the ground and berated him in front of everyone. Joff doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would tolerate that all too well.
The one thing I'll say about all that is good evidence. Do we really know that Joffrey hates Tyrion? Is there perhaps a piece of Joffrey that is appreciative of the rough treatment he gets from Tyrion? Like, he cares about me. He's trying to make me a better person. I don't remember being a child, so I assume I was one. So I don't know whether or not, an adult dressing you down, even physically or, non-physically, let's say, only leads to resentment, or can it also lead to, I know why they were doing it.
I guess it depends on the kid, the person, Yeah. I'm not sure Joff has that in him yet, or maybe.
But then is another part of Joffrey an ability to sort of forget the things, your moments of embarrassment. Your moments of embarrassment are like, it didn't happen,
Oh, that's possible. Yeah, it's his narcissism. Maybe he's turned a blind eye to such things. Yeah, but he's the king, so he has obvious authority, and he was with Ser Mandon on the city wall right before Tyrion and Ser Mandon rode out to the King's Gate. So, he had better opportunity than his mother did.
Yes, and more spur of the moment opportunity, yeah.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, more spur of the moment. But no one could have foreseen Tyrion leading the sortie that he's leading. That was a very spur of the moment situation. So I don't think anybody could have said, hey, when you're out there, kill him, because that happened with no one could have foreseen that happening. So
yeah.
And then my final one, I'll just say, is so Littlefinger does have some beef with him. Shirley suspects Tyrion, knows that he claimed the dagger was Tyrion's, the dagger that the cat Spock used to try and kill Bran, and possibly fears further retribution from Tyrion. He did confront Tyrion about the game that Tyrion played when he was trying to find the mole in the small council, and he fed everyone the wrong story to see which story got back to Cersei.
Yeah.
And Littlefinger was kind of irked about that, but I don't know if Littlefinger fits because, first of all, he doesn't have the authority to boss Ser Mandon around, and the only things that Littlefinger has are financial reasons, to bribe someone financially, and Mandon, as a member of the Kingsguard, I don't know that would sway him.
Presumably everything you want is taken care of, and anything else you wouldn't be able to have anyway because you're a Kingsguard.
Right.
You've given up property, so
yes.
Yeah.
Now, Varys and Grand Maester Pycelle also both have beefs with Tyrion, but I don't know that they have any more authority over Mandon than Littlefinger. So I agree. It's very likely Cersei. I just think Joff could also be a possible candidate.
To Littlefinger, I will say that I feel towards Littlefinger as I feel towards Maegor. That I feel that he needs a friend. He needs someone to defend him against the slings and arrows of your accusations.
Littlefinger, the misunderstood.
He does have the smarts to put a plan in this in place in advance. So
yes,
and you could drip that poison in Mandon Moore's ears early on. Like, you keep watching Tyrion. Tyrion will besmirch your good name this whole time. If you ever get a chance, just stick a sword through his head.
It would have been a really good opportunity when Tyrion was standing on the chair, on top of the box, on top of the Merlin.
Yeah, I'll be the one to hold you. Yeah.
Yeah. One little nudge, and that whole thing was coming down.
Maybe it is just Mandon going rogue. Just like he's just fed up.
Yes.
His life's work is fighting, and he sees this half man doing it just as well as him.
His ego couldn't take it.
He's there doing like hi ho silver on the horse with his axe in the air. I did most of the killing.
Yeah, I guess it's possible. Maybe he thought, Joff would really appreciate this.
Yes, true. All right, do you have some background for us?
I do actually have some background. So I bet when Martin wrote this chapter, he thought there's no way that they're going to be able to find any background in this chapter. It's just one battle scene, but I came prepared. So first, let's talk about, since it seems like we've seen the end of Ser Mandon Moore, let's talk a little bit about House Moore, which is from the Vale. And it's said that their sigil is 3 bronze spearheads on white with a bronze border, and the white having crenellations into the bronze border, or the bronze into the white, either way. It's also said that the house is a knightly house rather than a lordly one, meaning that they're landed knights, a lesser form of nobility than lords. Think of like Clegane's Keep and Gregor and Sandor Clegane. I keep saying it's said because this is all semi-canon. It's from other sources besides the...
Once it's in our podcast, it becomes canon.
It is. It does, yes. So it is now official. Now, here's something interesting that I found. Ser Mandon wasn't the first Moore in the Kingsguard to be involved in the death, or in this case, attempted murder, of a member of the royal family.
Get out!
I know, right? Ser Mandon Moore was a member of the ever-so-misunderstood King Maegor's Kingsguard. And when Maegor's first wife, Queen Cerise Hightower, died suddenly in 45 AC, some believe that Mallador was involved. The rumor is that at the behest of King Maegor, Mallador held the queen down while Sir Owen Bush was to remove her tongue. However, in the struggle, Owen accidentally slit the queen's throat instead. But the legitimacy of that claim is disputed. But what is not under dispute is that when Queen Tyanna of the Tower, Maegor's third of his 6 wives, was suspected of treason by her husband, Mallador and his partner in crime, Owen, fetched her for the king. The king then cut his wife's heart out with his sword Blackfire and fed it to his dogs, all the while Sir Mallador stood watch. Now, you might remember last week we were talking about how King Jaehaerys had to rebuild the Kingsguard after his uncle Maegor's death. Well, Sir Mallador didn't survive the transition of power because he was accused of aiding in the death of Queen Cerise, a charge he denied, claiming that the woman died of shrewishness.
Not usually fatal, but go on.
Right, yes, can't say for sure it wasn't there. As they couldn't prove his role in her death, King Jaehaerys instead had him beheaded for his part in the murder of Queen Tyanna. What about Sir Owen, you might ask? And if you didn't, I'm going to tell you anyway. He was just as involved in all the misunderstandings with the queens. So don't worry. Shortly before Maegor himself died, Owen was found dead outside of a brothel, his genitalia having been removed and stuffed in his mouth.
I mean, this was hundreds of years ago. They'd all be dead by now anyway.
Right.
I'm not going to shed too many tears for them. Comparison with the television show, all of this is captured but pretty truncated. So Tyrion's rallying the troops that he did at the end of the last chapter comes in the TV show after the Hound pretty obviously deserts. He actually gives a speech which finishes with the words, F the king, to the king. The king is present, so not much debate about whether or not he's just taking a little breather or he's out of there. Yeah. At that point, the king chooses to go back to the Red Keep rather than to lead the troops out. And interestingly, on departure, Joffrey asks Mandon Moore to represent him on the field.
Ah.
So maybe a clue as to intent there. George Martin's involved in the TV show.
Right.
Tyrion leads the troops out of the drains, not out of the Sally Port, which I think is quite clever. It sort of ties in with some of Tyrion's backstories.
Right.
The battle is all on land. They don't bother with the whole ship thing. All of the forces are landing in rowboats from the ships that weren't destroyed in the fire.
Okay.
Remember, everyone has come by ship in the TV show. Nobody's on the other side of the river, so it's all sort of like marine landing.
Okay.
Tyrion is slashed pretty horribly across the face by Moore, who, by the way, just before he does it, he actually saves Tyrion's life. A guy's about to kill Tyrion, Moore kills the guy, and then slashes Tyrion across the face. It's like, dude, you really want to be in the frame for this, don't you? You're going to just let him die. Pod skewers Moore before he can finish him off. Tyrion's injury looks pretty life-threatening. Not guaranteed to be life-threatening, but, I mean, there's a big slash from sort of like his temple all the way across his nose down to the lower part of his jaw.
Oh.
And it bleeds pretty profusely. So
yeah, I bet it would.
Pedantry, I think we both have the same one. This is the general one, that the battle fever or not, Tyrion should not be this good at fighting. His previous battle at the Green Fort was much more realistic. It gave him some wins, sure, but it was scrappy and inventive, not sort of like heroic like Jaime.
Right. Yeah, there was a few lines, like one line was knights twice his size fled from him or stood and died. And there's this one scene where someone comes at him with a spear, and he lops the head of the spear off. Then he lops the hand of the man off. Then he lops the arm of the man off. All the while he's like riding circles around him. And I just thought, surely he's not skilled enough rider to be doing that.
Didn't he ride circles at the Green Fort too?
He did, yes. I had an issue with that.
That's his thing. He rides circles. Maybe this is a tactic. Oh, one other minor pedantry compared to the major ones, but they form a wedge, and then they're said to be riding knee to knee. But as I understand the shape of a wedge, your knees wouldn't be knee to knee with your neighbour.
Right.
You'd
be like knee to flank
the
or
front
something.
of the horse.
Yes. Right.
If
Good
you
point.
were knee to knee, you would be in a straight line.
Yes, you would.
So I thought that was...
Yeah, maybe I don't understand how wedges form up, but I
mean, to me, you've got one at the front, and then the next two are slightly further back.
Right.
On either side of him, and then the next two are slightly further back on the sides. That's what a wedge looks like.
That's in my mind. That's what it looks like anyway. Yes, I agree.
Unless he means my knee to the horse's front knee. Maybe that's what he means.
Yes,
not
maybe. Got to be more specific. Whose knees are we talking about here?
News and notes.
News and notes. So you may remember that we've talked about this upcoming boxing match between Hafthor Bjornsson, who played the Mountain in season 4 of 8 of A Game of Thrones. Or 4 through 8, sorry, not 4 of 8. And fellow strongman Eddie Hall. Well, it took place on March 19th. And although both men spent time on the mat, Thor won the bout by unanimous decision of 57-54. And the fight was dubbed the heaviest boxing match in history. And I'll give you some numbers here. Hall weighed in at 142 kilograms, which is about 313 pounds, which is, both men lost a lot of weight. It's down from 197 kilograms, or 434 pounds, back when he won the World's Strongest Man competition in 2017. Thor weighed in at 152 kilograms, or 335 pounds, down from 205 kilograms, or 452 pounds at the peak of his strongman days. So their combined weight was 294-ish kilograms, or 648 pounds.
How many rounds was this boxing match?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I did watch some of the clips of it, but I can't remember how many rounds it went.
I cannot believe that they didn't knock each other out. I mean, just the sheer size of this. I mean, just one landed punch. I mean, I guess they're big fellas. They can take a punch too, but still, I mean, like, it just feels like it's amazing that this went the distance.
Yeah, it really was. In fact, I was watching some of the clips, and some of the commentary were talking about how good of conditioning that especially Thor was in. That for a man his size, he was holding up admirably well. So yeah, I watched. Both men did get knocked down a time or two,
right?
And,
but still,
but they got back up. So I guess when you're that size, you could take a punch.
But they're taking a punch from a guy that size. That's the bit that gets me.
Right. Yes.
I mean, I couldn't take a sneeze from one of those two.
Especially since both of these men have won the World's Strongest Man competition.
Right.
You have to imagine they could throw a pretty hard punch.
Yeah. So we got a we got a review on Apple Podcasts from 100 MPH, which is a great name.
Yes. And
it's entitled Perfektenschlag, which is a great word, and I'd forgotten it. I had to look it up, but then when I looked it up, I remembered it. It's a It's an Office thing, yeah?
Ah, yes, right.
It's a Dwight Schrute thing. Yeah?
Yes.
So that's it. And it means like when you're really in the zone, it's perfect. Everything is,
like
yes.
if you have battle fever or something.
Yes, it's a little, yes. I think he's comparing our podcast to Tyrion's battle fever of today.
I think so. I think so, yeah.
So he or she said, "This is my first experience with a podcast and honestly the best starting choice. I watched the show a couple times and listened to the audiobooks 3 times. Roy Dotrice was an awesome narrator and realised, what's next? Then I accidentally stumbled upon Ghosts of Harrenhal podcast on Spotify, got hooked immediately. I thought the books were better than the show since you get to experience the characters' thoughts. However, Simon and Mackelly added more to the perspective by digging even further into the characters' stories, thoughts and motives to answer any further questions you might have. I highly recommend this podcast and cannot wait to finally catch up. 28 episodes away. Thank you guys for all your hard work and efforts to keep it up. May your hats fly as high as your dreams."
MGS, which is Michael Gary Scott.
Oh.
I believe that quote came from when he was asked to speak at Ryan's business school. And that was a quote he wanted to go with. May your hats fly as far as your dreams. In regards to graduation. Yes, that review was Perfektenschlag. So thank you very much, 100 MPH.
Conclusion. So Tyrion appears to be alive. He's he seems to have lost his axe in the battle, but surely he's going to have one to grind with his perfidious sister.
Or nephew.
Or fellow member of the small council.
Right.
Or recently dispatched member of the Kingsguard.
Yes. But leading candidate would probably be his sister, I agree.
Yeah, if I were him, I would want unbelievable evidence of someone else's involvement
right.
before.
Guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
Oh, but really, Tyrion probably should have died in this battle. Not that I'd wanted him to, but he just really had no business surviving. Like I said, it was almost dreamlike, where he fought so bravely and fiercely, and so many times in the description there was that somehow he did something, and I just don't know how he could have been nearly trained well enough to do the things he did.
If it makes you feel any better, I really like your theory that it was a dream. That he banged his head on the way out of the Sallyport and he just dreamt the whole thing.
Right. Yes, that's what it was. But in the TV show at the battle at the Green Fork, he
does get knocked out. Yeah, someone's swinging a hammer before the thing just clocks him on the head, and he goes down and misses the whole battle. So, did Tyrion see something in the confusion of battle? Was Stannis fighting on both banks, and if so, who?
Right.
Is it just the minor skirmish that would be with the mountain clans, or is one of the possible rescuing forces have arrived for Tyrion and co?
Yeah, exactly. So the Tyrells are a possibility. Like you said, maybe Dorne has changed sides. Could be.
Not Tywin, because they're on the wrong side of the river.
That's what I was going with that. Unlikely Tywin. Unless Tywin somehow figured out how to cross the river, like a crazy idea. Figured how to get to the other side of the river.
Unbeknownst, those 20 ships, they've been flying across the other way, like in droves.
But I will say that the battle doesn't seem nearly as dire for Stannis' side as it did as Davos led on at the end of his chapter.
Well, to be fair to Davos, he was being dragged towards a flaming death whilst his ship sank around him. It probably looked pretty bad to Davos at that point.
Especially since likely many of his family members died in the battle, his sons. So he was probably not in a great state of mind. But it just the way that chapter, the description of that chapter went, it looked like it was all over for Stannis's fleet, and it was going to all be destroyed. It doesn't seem quite nearly as bad as we were thinking back then.
So bravo to Podrick Payne for saving Tyrion, and boo to Mandon Moore for being a cold, shark-eyed killer.
Right. Yes, I agree. One thing about Pod is it doesn't actually say that Pod pushed him. It said he lurched to the left or the right or whatever, and then went up against the rail and fell in. And so I wondered if it was Pod or if the boat just shifted. It's on the water, and there's other things smacking up against it. Could be he just lost his balance and fell in.
The TV show left no doubt.
Right.
Pod skewered him, and it snapped off, and Pod was left with the stump as Moore went down. So definitely. Right. Okay, we're done here.
Yeah.
There are 3 ways that you could help us. You could go out and give us a positive review. Nothing helps spread the word better than that. We would appreciate it. You can buy some merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com, or you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhal, where you can become a sustainer and join the other sustainers, for whom we are very grateful.
Eternally so. And, of course, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and, of course, we're on Discord. So,
thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.